Ever feel like you're kind of kept in the dark about what happens when a police officer is accused of misconduct?
Yeah.
You hear about these investigations, but the details are always so secretive.
Mm.
Well, today we're going deep into some newly released records about a really controversial case in Rio Vista, California.
Oh, wow.
It involves a late-night arrest, a police dog bite allegations of falsified reports, and ultimately the dismantling of an entire police department.
Wow. So this is really going to give us a glimpse into the inner workings of internal affairs investigations, right?
Exactly, and those are usually hidden from the public eye, so we don't often get to see how police departments police themselves.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
And you know what makes this even more interesting is this case isn't just about one arrest gone wrong.
Right.
It raises all these questions about how police accountability really works and who the system protects,
Mm.
and what happens when those in power choose to protect themselves over serving the public.
That's a great point.
So let's start with the basics. The story starts on a September night in 2018 in Rio Vista, California.
Okay.
It's 3:00 a.m., and a 56-year-old woman named Catherine Jensen is making a series of 911 calls.
Okay.
She's expressing concerns about her mental health.
Oh, wow.
She believes there's an emergency. She's genuinely scared that something's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And these calls, while they were frequent, they really do seem to have been made in good faith.
Okay.
Jensen's not trying to prank anyone or cause trouble. She genuinely believes she needs help.
Right.
But to the officers that respond to the scene, Officers Man Lee and Natalie Rafferty,
Mm-hmm.
it appears to be a potential case of 9/11 harassment.
So that's where things start to escalate.
Yeah. And despite Jensen's clear mental distress, Lee and Rafferty decide to arrest her
Oh, wow.
for alleged 9/11 harassment and resisting arrest.
The charge of resisting arrest always seems to come up in these cases.
It does, and it's something that we're going to come back to later on.
Okay.
But for now, just know that things spiral out of control very quickly.
Okay.
Jensen struggles. Her partner, David O'Reilly, is protesting the arrest.
Mm-hmm.
And in all this chaos, Rafferty's police dog is accidentally released.
Oh, no.
And the dog attacks Jensen, biting her arm and causing some pretty serious injuries.
Wow.
Puncture wounds, ripped tissue, the kind of trauma that leaves lasting scars.
It's a pretty disturbing scene.
It is, and it immediately raises questions about the use of force.
Right.
But what happens next is where the case takes a really intriguing turn.
Okay.
Rio Vista Police Chief Dan Daly, perhaps sensing how serious this is,
Mm-hmm.
launches an internal investigation.
Okay.
And he brings in an independent investigator named Mark Siemens to look into what happened that night.
Got it. So Siemens starts digging into this case, reviewing body camera footage, interviewing officers. And what he uncovers is pretty troubling.
Oh, yeah, there are these discrepancies between the officers' reports and what the video evidence actually shows.
Oh, wow.
And it seems that Rafferty, in an attempt to justify the arrest and the dog bite,
Yeah.
made some big changes to Lee's initial report.
Like, what kind of changes?
Well, for example, Rafferty's report claims that O'Reilly, Jensen's partner,
Yeah.
was yelling aggressively and posing a threat,
Uh-huh.
but the video doesn't support that at all.
Oh, wow.
She also adds language about Jensen trying to bite the officers.
Really?
Yeah, emphasizing this quote-unquote deadly threat of human bites, even though Jensen barely left a mark on them.
Sounds like she's trying to paint a picture that's not entirely accurate.
Right, exaggerating the threat to justify the use of force
Yeah.
and that dog bite.
Yeah, but why would she do that? I mean, what's the motivation there?
Well, to understand that, we need to bring in some expert commentary.
Okay.
Laura Scordell, who's a retired judge and former police auditor,
Mm-hmm.
with years of experience observing law enforcement practices,
Okay.
offers some really valuable insight here.
Okay, what does she say?
She points out that this charge of resisting arrest, it's often overused,
Yeah.
and it becomes this kind of catch-all justification for excessive force.
So it's like a way to shift the blame.
Yeah, to make it seem like the person being arrested is actually responsible for the escalation of force,
Right.
even if their actions were just a reaction to being apprehended,
Mm-hmm.
maybe even fueled by fear or confusion.
Yeah.
And Cordell, having seen so many cases over her career,
Yeah.
also highlights this disturbing pattern.
What's that?
Black and brown men are way more likely to be targeted with this charge,
Wow.
which suggests there might be some racial bias in how it's being applied.
So this isn't just about one isolated incident in Rio Vista.
Wow.
It's connected to a much larger conversation about systemic issues within law enforcement,
Right.
about power imbalances and how certain charges can be used to justify actions that might otherwise be scrutinized.
Exactly. And it underscores why this case resonated so far beyond just this one small town.
Right.
Now, the fallout from this investigation is pretty significant.
Okay.
Based on Siemens' findings, Chief Daly fires both Rafferty and Lee for misconduct.
So it seems like justice is being served?
Yeah, you'd think so, but that's actually not where the story ends.
Really?
This is actually just the beginning of a whole new chapter.
Oh, wow. Okay. I'm intrigued.
Yeah.
So where do we go from here? So we left off with Rafferty and Lee getting fired for misconduct in Jensen's arrest.
Right.
But as we dig deeper into this case, we see this whole web of legal protections and union power that can really shield officers from consequences.
Yeah, even when there's clear evidence that they did something wrong.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So Natalie Rafferty,
Okay.
backed by her police union,
Yeah.
starts this fight to get her job back.
Okay.
Her attorney, Michael Raines, argues that something called the Police Bill of Rights
Okay.
guarantees her due process rights,
Uh-huh.
just like any other employee facing disciplinary action.
But hold on, these aren't just any employees. We're
Aye.
talking about people with the authority to use force to detain people, to make these life-altering decisions so quickly.
Right.
Shouldn't there be more scrutiny? Shouldn't there be more accountability?
That's a great point, and that's actually the argument that Brendan Woods makes.
A chief public defender.
Exactly. He says that these aren't standard due process rights. These are like heightened protections that create this imbalance of power that tips the scales in favor of law enforcement.
Wow, even when there's evidence of misconduct.
Exactly.
So you're saying the system designed to hold police accountable might be making it harder to get justice.
It's a tough reality, and the Rivas case really shows us how this can happen.
Okay.
So the Police Bill of Rights has these provisions that can delay investigations. They can limit what questions officers have to answer.
Wow.
They can even give officers access to evidence before the public sees it.
It's like the system is prioritizing protecting itself over getting justice for victims like Katherine Jensen.
Yeah, that's a valid concern, and it's a big part of this whole debate around police accountability.
Right.
So in Rafferty's case, the investigation found that she falsified reports.
Yeah.
And that the arrest wasn't justified.
Right.
But despite those findings, an arbitrator, it's like a neutral third party who reviews the case,
Right.
sided with Rafferty,
Right.
and ordered her to be reinstated with back pay.
So even though she was found to have lied and abused her authority,
Right.
she gets her job back and gets paid for the time she was off.
Unfortunately. Yeah, it happens.
Wow. I mean, how does that make sense?
It's a question a lot of people are asking.
Yeah.
It shows just how powerful police unions are and how complicated it is to navigate a system
Yeah.
that often seems designed to protect officers even when they violate public trust.
That's hard to hear, especially for people who believe accountability is essential.
Absolutely. It feels like justice isn't being served.
Right. And this feeling that things are imbalanced is made even worse by the fact that Chief Daly never interviewed Katherine Jensen
Oh, wow.
during the investigation.
So her side of the story.
Right. Her experience as the victim
Yeah.
was completely ignored.
It's like the system was more focused on protecting itself than seeking justice for the person who was wronged.
Right. And it makes you think about how important transparency really is.
Absolutely.
The only reason we know any of this
Yeah.
is because of California's Right to Know Act,
Right.
which allows for the release of certain police records
Yeah.
that used to be confidential. So if this law didn't exist, this whole story could have been hidden away.
Exactly. Buried in internal files with no public scrutiny.
Wow. And no accountability.
It's a scary thought, right?
It is.
Makes you wonder how many other cases like this are out there.
Yeah, hidden because of this lack of transparency and accountability.
Exactly.
It's like they say sunlight is the best disinfectant. Shining a light on these internal investigations is crucial to understanding how police departments really operate
It is.
and whether they're really serving and protecting their communities.
Right. Transparency is a key step toward real reform,
Yeah.
towards a system that values both the rights of officers and justice for victims of misconduct.
So where do we go from here?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is.
It's what experts, activists, policymakers are all wrestling with.
Yeah.
There's no easy fix.
Right.
But one thing's for sure, we have to keep talking about this.
Mhm.
We have to keep pushing for transparency, for accountability,
Yeah.
for a system that puts justice for everyone first.
We've been talking about this Rio Vista case right from that late night arrest all the way to the police department being shut down.
Yeah. It's been a wild ride.
It has. And as we're wrapping up this deep dive, I keep coming back to this question.
What's that?
What does justice even look like in a case like this?
It's a really good question, and it gets to the heart of this debate about holding police accountable, right?
Right.
Is it enough to just punish the officers? Or does real justice mean something more?
Because even though Rafferty and Lee lost their jobs,
Right.
and even though Rafferty got her job back, but was never really cleared of wrongdoing, it still feels like something's missing.
I agree.
Like, what about Katherine Jensen, the woman at the center of all this? She never even got an apology.
Yeah, right.
From the officers or the department.
Yeah, and as we said before, Chief Daley never even talked to her during the investigation.
It's like her experience as the victim was completely forgotten.
It's like the system was so busy protecting itself that it forgot about the real human cost of what those officers did.
Absolutely. And it makes you realize we need a system that puts victims first.
Yeah, a system that centers their needs and experiences.
Transparency is important, don't get me wrong.
Of course.
But it's just the first step.
Right. We need systems that actually prioritize the people who've been hurt by police misconduct.
So what would that look like?
Yeah.
What needs to change to make a system that truly gets justice for victims?
Well, first we have to make sure victims have a say in the entire investigation.
Okay.
That means interviewing them right away and really listening to what they have to say.
Yeah, taking their statements seriously.
Exactly, and keeping them in the loop about what's happening with the investigation.
And it means admitting when harm has been done and giving genuine apologies when it's appropriate.
Absolutely. Accountability isn't just about punishing people. It's also about owning up to mistakes.
Right.
Trying to fix the damage that's been done.
Yeah.
Making things right with the people who've been affected.
It's about recognizing that real people are hurt by these events.
Exactly.
Recognizing the trauma, the ripple effects it has on families and communities.
Yeah, and it's about understanding that real justice takes more than just disciplining officers.
Right.
It means dealing with the deeper problems that lead to police misconduct in the first place.
So talking honestly about race and bias in policing, investing in community programs that can help, instead of just calling the police.
Yes.
And putting in place stricter policies and training that focus on de-escalation.
Right.
And respecting people's rights.
It's a complicated issue, but it's one we have to face if we want a fair and just system of law enforcement.
One that's accountable to the people it's supposed to serve.
Exactly.
This Rio Vista case with all its twists and turns reminds us that fighting for justice is a journey.
It really is.
It's about staying aware, questioning things, and holding those in power responsible.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
It's a journey we have to take together if we want a society where everyone feels safe and respected by law enforcement.
I think that's a great note to end on.
I do too. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
We'll be back next time with another story. Another chance to explore the complicated world we live in.
I'm looking forward to it.
Until then, keep asking those tough questions. Keep learning and keep pushing for a better tomorrow.